Steve, thank you as always for the time. How you doing today?
Good to see you, Trey.
Great to see you as well. I understand that you just got done with a boxing class. How'd the boxing class go today?
Not too good. I don't think I last a real round. It's one of those things you turn 50, like, maybe now's the time to learn self-defense. So horrible. I'm just preparing myself for when I end up in a home and I want to fight over some applesauce or, I don't want to watch Blue Bloods tonight on the communal TV. So are we gonna go for it? But yeah, it's dude, I'll tell you, I mean, played hockey all my life. I like to jump rope, but I've always heard it's one of the most difficult sports in terms of cardio. And after doing, what, maybe five or six classes, it's by far the most cardio and just the most spent I feel after a workout ever.
Well, that's interesting because I've heard the same thing about hockey. I've ice skated a little bit in my life, but growing up in Texas, I never played ice hockey. I hear that when you're actually out on the ice for a shift, it's like a full sprint for however long you're out there. So it's even harder than hockey, huh?
Yeah, hockey, at least like you can, I mean, much like boxing, I suppose you could step back or you have breathers between each, what's it called, a round. Um, but with hockey, yeah, it is a full-on sprint, including, just driving just getting checked and rammed by somebody going 20, 30 miles per hour at the pro level. You throw that in, it's a little dicey of a proposition, but there's nothing like ice hockey. I grew up playing since I was six, and I absolutely love this sport. I don't think there's a better sport to watch live. I also don't think there's a better sport come playoffs than the NHL, given that it's seven, it's four rounds at the Stanley Cup, seven games, best of seven. And it is literally, I mean, you have guys playing with broken ribs, fingers, toes, concussions, I'm sure, all of it. And it's the most physically draining of all the major sports. So I just have so much admiration for those guys. It's the best. And look, if it's a 2-1 game in hockey, in the third period, there's a minute left, they're going to pull the goalie and they're going to play and they're just going to go for it. And it's really exciting as opposed to basketball. You're constantly fouled. Football, it's all about possession. But hockey, it's just full on blank slate, go for it. That's why I truly love the sport.
Yeah, in terms of the professional sports, it's the only one that is tolerable in terms of going to games regularly because football, NFL games are boring to go to. I know you're a Steelers fan.
Yeah,
You guys go to games from time to time. It's a much better experience on television, in my opinion. NBA games in person now are complete sensory overload. It's like they're trying to distract you from how mediocre to bad the product is on the court. And then baseball
right,
is baseball. It's cool, but it's also very laid back. It's a storyteller sport, so there's a lot of downtime
right,
between the action. Whereas hockey, it's like once that puck is dropped, it's like you have a 2-1 game in soccer, let's say. That could be a boring game that you're watching, where it's like, oh, there
right.
were five total opportunities on goal. A 2-1 hockey game, there were probably what, 30 to 40 shots on goal between the two teams, if not more, and a whole lot of physicality there too.
Yeah, I mean, I love baseball, but come playoff time, especially, it's really about more strategy than anything, right? I mean, the managers are really dictating the flow of that game, and there's nothing better than coming down in the ninth inning and having Aaron Judge or Ohtani at bat, in that three batter rotation, to win the game and win it all. There's nothing like that, but again, in baseball, there hasn't been anything like Red Sox Yankees in such a long time. That rivalry hit such a peak in the early 2000s, and since then I haven't seen real genuine animosity where teams hated each other and it was like must see TV. Whereas hockey, it's like they really do hate each other. I mean, guys are beating the shit out of each other. That Four Nations tournament was such a great example of the type of hockey that like the Kachucks in particular bring, and the fact that they're leaders on that team and they kind of like set the blueprint for how the team was going to proceed. Unfortunately, Matthew got injured in that final game, so you didn't see the fireworks we saw in the prelim, but I think it's setting the table for the Olympics, which is going to be great. And any hockey purist will tell you it's not really a full-on competition without Russia. You want Russia there as well. So hopefully we get all that. I know that they're working that out right now, saying that they want Russia to compete. So I certainly would like to see it because if you're going to win it, you want to know that you beat the best.
Was that done specifically because of the Ukraine war? Is that why Russia was
Yeah.
left like what's happened in other sports?
Yeah, it affected the NHL Four Nations for some reason, which is such a bummer. But I read that they're trying to squash that and make it so that everybody's able to compete in the Olympics. And I think the NHL is going to back this, and their premier players are going to be in it. So I think the good news is that America has always been Canada and Russia's whipping boy, and now we actually on paper have a team that can compete with anybody. And we just fell a goal short in overtime, which is such a bummer.
Yeah, plus hockey players tend to be some of the most down to earth professional athletes. Like I worked in Chicago at WGN Radio during the
Of
height of the
course.
Blackhawks successes, and there were a lot of cool guys on that roster. There were some D bags as well. But you hang out with a fair number of hockey players too. I mean, you annually do the benefit for the Mario Lemieux Foundation. Has that been your experience with hockey guys too? Is that they're really cool guys?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think that most of them grow up as farm kids, in
Yeah.
Canada, and they're coming off from like these peripheral markets that are cold and barren and don't have much to do. So you kind of get your teeth kicked in by the elements, especially up in Canada. But I agree with you. I think of all the four major sports, the kindest, most outgoing, and coolest hangs I've ever had after shows or, people that have come to shows are hockey players by far. I'd say hockey and baseball are my two favorite in terms of like meeting professional athletes and getting to spend time with them. But I do an annual benefit for the Mario Lemieux Foundation. And even in that, you're meeting a lot of the alumni, and Mario Lemieux is as big as it gets in the hockey world. And this guy runs a fantasy camp, and he's literally buying everybody drinks, hanging, accessible, as cool as it gets, and absolutely hilarious too, which is really cool. There's a regal quality about that guy, and I've heard that there are other fantasy camps out there with just as elite premier kind of talent, and there's no peripheral accessibility even with this guy. But I mean, the guy, he was on our bench. He's all over. He's cracking open a beer in our locker room as soon as the game's on. And hey, how you doing, boys? It's like that is, that's Mario Lemieux. It's pretty wild. So I think again, just a testament to not only him, to hockey, but also the city of Pittsburgh. The city of Pittsburgh is just such a salt of the earth kind of like get you off your high horse pretty quickly kind of town.
Considering he has gained a sort of Paul Bunyan sort of status, a legendary, almost urban legend sort of status, have you met Jaromir Jagr through your friendship with Mario Lemieux out of curiosity?
No, but when I was a kid, I think Yager's 52, 53. I'm 50. So when he came, like I was a senior in high school, I think he had just gotten drafted.
Hmm.
Or maybe I was a junior, maybe even sophomore, I don't know. But when he got drafted, I remember my friend and I heard on the news Yager was going to the Civic Arena for his first day at camp. And me and my buddy, I believe we were the first ones there to get an autograph because we drove down and we got an autograph. That was the only time I met him. But he looked a little shell shocked, I think, that anybody was there to see him. But that was the only time I ever met him. But look, to be from Pittsburgh and to be blessed with Lemieux, then literally Yager, who is second all-time points, and you consider he left to go play in Europe and Russia for I think 3 seasons. Like he would have blown Gretzky's records out. Obviously, a longer duration of time compared to the short amount of time Gretzky did it in. But I mean, Yager would be number one on that list, hands down. But when you compile his international numbers and everything else, he's unreal. But Lemieux's thing was always he was stymied, obviously, A, by cancer, a debilitating back, and constant physical injuries that hurt him. And then we get Crosby and Malkin. It's like this is unbelievable. So, I'm hoping the Pens aren't snake bitten these next few years. I hope we get another generational talent that we can be proud of as well.
Yeah, do you have any hope for the Pittsburgh Pirates to sniff a World Series anytime soon? No?
No, no, that guy, Bob Nutting is just such a horrible owner. The record's pressed. He's always going to play the same song. I think the fans obviously have shown our cards. The city of Pittsburgh, there's billboards all the time. Please sell the team, sell the team. And
Jeez.
Mark Cuban said it best. Mark Cuban, another gentleman in Texas, said it best. He's like, would you take $25 million dollars a year and stand in the middle of Market Square in Pittsburgh and get yelled at by everybody for 8 hours a day for 26 mil? Who wouldn't do that? And it's like, yeah. And that's Bob Nutt's job. He's just there to collect residual from all the TV contracts and everything else. And it's just such a bummer that he's just there doing it for profit. and we'll see Skeens get a World Series ring for LA or New York. It's such a
Yeah,
bummer.
sad. That's a sad reality for
And he
sure.
seems like a great guy too, which is the worst part. You know, he seems like a really good dude. And you guys like McCutcheon that are willing to come back and show some veteran leadership. And it just like it really is just a bummer, all the talent that's gone through that revolving door in Pittsburgh.
So the last time we talked, it was on the verge of you coming to the Comedy Mothership for the very first time. You're going to be
Yeah.
back there this weekend. You had not done any guest spots up to that point. You wanted to experience for the very first time as a headliner. I saw one of the shows that weekend. It was just as funny, if not funnier, than when you were at the Creek in the Cave.
Oh,
Prior to
thank you.
that, what was your initial experience with the Mothership like,
Well,
Steve?
first off, let's clear something up. You came over and said, "Hey," and then you dipped. And I was like, "Dude, I want to get a drink with you." So
No,
so
no,
this
no, 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 no. We're not
were
going.
we out?
We're not
We're
going. We're not going Patrick Sharp with this rumor right now. I came up and said, "Hey, Steve, great show. You want to grab that drink now?" And you're like, "Dude, I just hung out with Jelly
Oh,
Roll the night before, and
you
I
caught me
am in
the
some serious pain." To your credit, you said we will go get that. Let's go get screw it. Let's
let's
go
do
get
it this
that
time
drink. And I
then. Yeah.
said, "Absolutely not. I don't want to do that to you right now. The next time you're in town, you and I can maybe grab a drink."
That's
So
true. Okay, because
it's
I
something
remember
in
talking to
between
you
there.
in the lobby. I remember talking to you in the lobby.
Yeah.
But that is very true. Jelly Roll is let's just say he can drink a lot more than the average human being.
It looks like it.
So, yeah, I mean, it is when you say, yeah, I'll get a drink with Jelly Roll. First off, a drink is not a drink. Like a shot glass for us is that, right? A shot glass is a cocktail glass for him. He's a man of size and talent and heart. Okay, so that's the
Yeah.
best way I describe it. But you better strap in. You better get some electrolytes, get some Gatorade, pre-order McDonald's, and get two extra value meals because you're going to need all the support and help you can get. It is an adventure.
It's like the rumors with Andre, or not the rumors. It's like Andre the Giant back in the
Oh
day.
yeah.
He'd hold a can of beer in his hand and it looked like a can of like Hunt's tomato paste or something.
Well, the worst part is I am not a tequila guy. I do not like tequila.
Yeah.
It's always provided me some of the worst memories on the road, and that's his go-to, right? And I'm like, "Can we switch it up? Can we do whiskey?" It's like, "Come on, man, you know I can't do that." It's like, "Well, I can't do this." But it's like you're not going to win that argument. So you do what he wants and you end up having an incredible experience, a great story. My wife will attest to it. I mean, she's right behind me working in the other room. But the last time I drank with him in Nashville, my wife had to come outside and pick me up out of the front yard and pull me in. And my kids woke me up in my office in the bathroom saying, "Daddy, why are you sleeping in here?" And I'm like, "Well, Jelly Roll did this to me. And that's why Egg Roll will never hang out with Jelly Roll ever again."
There's nothing that makes you feel like a winner more than your kids questioning why you're so hungover.
Yeah, is this normal, Daddy? Well, it will be in your 20s because it's in our genes. So enjoy the Irishness. Yeah.
So how was the mothership other than getting completely obliterated with Jelly Roll on Saturday night?
I'll tell you, it's one of those things where you hear, obviously, look, it's Joe Rogan, it's his club. It's like there's a standard, right? It's got the biggest podcast in the world. So you're just like, boy, I'm sure they did a great job. I'm sure it's great. And then you get there and everything is to the nines. And I don't just mean aesthetically, I don't just mean the club, I don't just mean the look, the feel, the vibe, the security, right? Every security guard is an MMA guy. It's like everything about it from the minute you get there to the minute you leave is first class as a comedian. It's one of those clubs where I'll tell you, you feel like you're in show business, right? They take
Mm.
care, such good care of you. You actually feel like you're in show business. And that starts from the top down. Obviously, that's Rogan, that's Adam, that's Carrie, all from the comedy store, coming over and having a budget and being able to roll out the red carpet for comics in every form or fashion. But especially as a headliner, you feel like entitled with responsibility of like, if I'm being treated this well, I need to pull out all the aces this
Mm.
weekend. So I just gave everything I could to every single show. And I've had a lot of compliments from the staff and looking forward to this next one. So yeah, I think you also have free license to be like the best version of who you are, which is what I really appreciate about that club. And there's very few clubs that kind of offer you that in a professional capacity when you go on the road. You'd be surprised at how like kind of like forgotten the headliner is in the algorithm of what, normally happens at a comedy club. You're almost kind of like an afterthought sometimes to certain staffs and certain clubs. But this one, it's just like it's the complete opposite of the pendulum swing.
Is that right? You go to some clubs and they are barely
Oh,
giving you the time of day as the headliner?
well, I'll tell you, I was in a club recently in Connecticut, and the clubs they're supposed to, you're at your hotel and they're supposed to pick you up before the show and bring you over to the club, especially if it's not walking distance, right? So I'm at a club and I'm sitting there in the lobby at 7:30. The show is literally at 7:30 and nobody's there. And I'm waiting, and nobody's calling me. It's now like 7:45. The MC is wrapping up. I know the feature act is probably on the stage. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, I'm not going to call. I'm going to see what happens here. And like 7:50, I get a phone call. Hey, are you here? I'm like, hey, fuckface. I'm in the lobby. You're supposed to get me. Go fuck yourself. So it was one of those times where it's just like, I mean, that's a perfect prime example of like, you know, just complete like not even thinking. It's unreal.
I haven't heard very many good things coming out of Connecticut, other than the occasional basketball success. I feel like Connecticut is filled with a very strange batch of people.
Yeah, ever since you let one of the greatest insignias, logos in the National Hockey League leave, like the Hartford Whalers, it's like, how can you ever do that? But it was so cool to see Carolina go retro just this past weekend and put them all in the Whalers gear. It was awesome to see the whale logo back on the ice. But yeah, I agree with you. I think Connecticut is one of those. It's where all the rich people in New York City go to like raise a family.
That helps to explain all the canary racing that's apparently happening in Connecticut. See, I have to
Yep.
ask you this because I feel like I heard it. I heard it on another comedy podcast. It was not an interview or a conversation that you were having. I think it was like we might be drunk guys or something, where you apparently have the record in New York City still for most spots done in a night. Something around 13. Is that correct?
Yeah,
Do you remember this?
I did a little documentary when I was about to move from New York to LA. And at the time, everybody was doing these like little albums. I thought, well, let me do something different. So I did a thing called 13 or Bust, where I wanted to see what the most shows in one night was. And I believe Attell did 12 in one night. And I was like, all right, well, let's go for the record. Let's do 13 or bust, But yeah, I know when you're starting at 6 and you go to 2 in the morning and you plot those out, like the timing has to work out perfectly because you have 15 to 20 minutes on stage, and then you got like another 15 to 20 minutes to get to the next venue via cab.
Hmm.
And I thought there's no way we're going to get to it. We'll probably get 10 if we're lucky, because it depends what time of night. It depends if that club is in Times Square. Are the shows getting out? Is everybody going somewhere? It's tough to get a cab at the time because there were no Ubers at that time when I did it too. So I thought, no way we'll beat this record. And it was the one night in my life where everything worked out perfectly. And every time I walked outside of a club, a cab just happened to be pulled up. We jumped in, did it. So it's a documentary on YouTube. Bill Burr's in it. This is how old it is. Bill Burr has hair. Robert Kelly's fat, and Dov Davidoff looks the same. So we were all having a roundtable about what it's like to be a stand-up in New York and just like a working comic. And it's been years since I've seen it. It gets brought up all the time, and I should go back and watch it because it's such a fun time capsule. But I also think about this like stand-up nowadays has become it's so much bigger than when it was when I started. I started in 97, and it was almost like you were a carny if you wanted to be stand-up. It's like we're coming out of the 80s boom. It's kind of frowned upon, sports jackets, corny jokes, McDonald's, I'm flying on an airplane, like all the stereotypical kind of like Seinfeldisms that came along with it, right? And so to be a stand-up back then was kind of like a really, really exclusive thing. And it was super exclusive if you got past at the cellar, super exclusive if you got past at the store, because nobody was doing it. But then even the handful of guys that were doing were pretty good. Nowadays, it's like it's scattershot, social media, YouTube. There's so many different factions of like what stand-up is or what comedy is. I've seen so many handles, comedian. It's like I don't even know what it is anymore, but I think I know what it is. I think I know what the pure art form of stand-up comedy is. So that is definitely a moment in time that I appreciate. I'm so glad I came up in the generation of comedy that I did, as opposed to now where it just like you could fill a room off of a year's worth of TikToks, but you've never done like the actual work. You never spent 5 hours emceeing shows at the store or the cellar and learning everybody's intros and learning how everybody else is you're watching Chappelle one set, you're watching Patrice O'Neill the other set. As an MC, you're forced to be there the whole night and see everything. So nowadays, I think these kids they don't even learn how to get credits. They don't learn any of it stuff. So I know it's a long-winded answer to 13 or bust, but that's essentially it. Yeah.
Well, I've talked to a couple of those people who are able to fill up a club based on the popularity that they have on social media. And I've also sensed with one in particular where it's like you don't have a respect or appreciation for this art form to the degree that you will be humbled as a result
Oh,
of
sure.
you still insisting and getting up on stage. Whoever was paying for tickets to go see him perform was going to get something very different from what they were accustomed to laughing at through his social media channel.
Sure. A perfect example of what you're talking about is there was a young girl who was immensely popular for 6 to 8 months, and her sole thing was she was lip syncing Donald Trump. That was it. She blew up on TikTok. She was the industry darling. She got a Netflix special out of this.
Oh
Okay.
God.
There were a lot of folks on SNL that came in and helped her with it, and it bombed. It bombed horrifically because she never did the work prior to in in that moment to earn that opportunity and really showcase it. That's why when you see guys like Shane or Nate or even Burr, right? They're going to be given 1,001 different kind of opportunities to do things. For example, like Joe Coy. Joe Coy is somebody that goes and hosts the Golden Globes. It wasn't received very well. I don't know that he had the time really to really make it work and get the reps in before he went up and did it. Those are all they could be considered excuses, right? But bottom line is he went up, he did it. It wasn't received well. Here's the good news. Joe has nothing to worry about because he has a backlog of 25 years of experience, and he's going to continue to sell out arenas. He's going to continue to go out. He's going to continue to crush it because he's a killer. He's a professional headliner. And somebody like that, it's like the industry will always find these flavors of the month, and they're heat-seeking missiles. They're finding these individuals and they're going to showcase them, and they don't have the dense foundation of years and blood and sweat and material to build up and really, blow that opportunity up, as opposed to those guys that slow roll and all of a sudden they're part of just the national fabric.
Yeah, Matt Rife is an interesting example of that because a lot of people assume he's somebody who just came out of nowhere. But
Sure.
regardless of what you think about Matt Rife, he had been doing it for a while. I want to say he'd been getting up since he was like 15 years old. That's not me saying whether I like or don't like Matt Rife. It's recognizing that he'd been at it longer than people were giving him credit for.
100%. And the good news is he's only going to get better and better and better. I mean, he got to a point where he's achieved a lot of fame for X, Y, and Z,
Yeah.
but the X, Y, and Z isn't substantiated unless you're doing the ABC, and the ABC is the work. And he's always grinded. He's always been at the clubs. And he exploited crowd work. He was one of the first to do that. And so I think when you're a comedian, right? People think, oh, you can just roast somebody. Oh, I just go up and improv. I'd go up and do crowd work. It's like these are all different gears of being a stand-up comic. Like Bert Kreischer is a great storyteller, right? Nate Bargatze is great at being relatable. There's everybody's got their own voice, but it's also like how many gears do you have? So like you're gonna go see Anthony Jeselnik, right? This is a guy that's like set up, dark, set up, dark. And about 25 minutes in, you kind of like you almost understand the flow. You understand what's going on there, right? Somebody like Matt Rife has spent years working on material, working on crowd work, and then spontaneously in the middle, that's improv too. So that's like three gears right there, right? So that's what's going to differentiate him. And so when you're a comic, you're in the batter's box, especially on social media, you're just taking big swings. And he took some big swings. That's the thing that worked. Boom. Well, now he's selling tickets, and now they're going to become and be exposed to those other three gears and see how dense of a talent he really is. So I'm happy for him. I'm happy for anybody that can garner success in stand-up comedy because it's so fucking difficult. It really is it's a tough job to just get up there and, again, you're just failing constantly. You're always failing. It's a profession of failure because for every 10 jokes you tell, one's going to work. The other nine are going to fucking suck. So when you see an hour special, you're not seeing these 700 jokes that didn't work for you to get to the 60 jokes that do work, right?
Yeah, you told me that last time. Batting 100 on the premises that you come up with is that's a crazy number to think about. I mean, that's it's batting well, it's batting half of the Mendoza line, but then again, that's it's why it is a job. It's not just about getting up there on stage for an hour long set if you're headlining, or maybe less than that, or going and finding spots here or there. You
Yeah.
really are having to think about it and write and just cultivate that idea into something much funnier and punch it up, obviously. And
Mhm.
that is a day long process. Now, your day might not start until noon or 1 o'clock. But
That's
once you get
true.
up and get going, then you're going to be writing those jokes out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, when people slag somebody like Rife or whatever, it's just like you're gonna see this he's the real deal. He's obviously very charismatic and now he's delving into films, and I think he's got a great team behind him to do it the right way. I think there have been some comics recently that have had opportunities in the film, in the feature world that it hasn't gone exactly how they wanted. And I think you gotta assemble a fantastic team to give you the support to make that work because you can't just you can do it, but it's like that's a whole nother faction of like I'm not saying I know exactly how it's done, but I've done two. I'm about to do a third, and it is something where you need a solid infrastructure behind you to give yourself the best opportunity to be successful in that realm.
I'm glad you just brought that up because I did want to ask you about two films that we've discussed in the past. One, you did a phenomenal documentary on The Amazing Jonathan. People can actually
Thank
watch
you.
that for free on YouTube. You were coming up, I don't, fictionalized is not necessarily the right way to put it, but you were coming up with a feature film where you were casting the Amazing Jonathan story. You had said that you had banged the script out when we talked last May. Are you any closer to getting that film made right now?
That one is taking a backseat now, actually, because we're literally at the final stages of casting a film I wrote, and it's just true story in the sports world on Caltech's basketball
Oh
team, the
yeah, no,
infamous.
we've talked about that one also. That was the other movie I was
Yeah.
going to ask about. So you're almost to the point of starting to make that one now.
So we're like this close to announcing who our lead is, and the train's going to leave the station, and it looks like this summer we'll be filming that up north of Vancouver. And again, for your listeners, it's the infamous Caltech basketball program, 2008, 2009. They don't win a single game for 30 years. A new coach comes in and he's going to turn the program around. He's going to make them competitive. And he gets there and realizes they're not just dressing super nerds that had never played basketball. They're dressing kids that had never played sports in their life. That's how bad the program is. So the whole film is he understands we're not going to the championship. We're not going to the playoffs. The whole film centers around the premise of this coach just getting these nerds to just win once, just win one damn game for the love of God. And that's really it. It's just taking a bunch of kids that have worked their whole lives from their brains and accessing a little bit more heart and melding the two and making them into winners. So it's been film is an arduous process. You got to be passionate about it, and this has been going on for probably 4.5 years now. That we're finally at the point where it's like it's finally coalescing. It's finally coming together. We're finally making it. So we'll be releasing all the information and press and all that stuff very soon.
All right, last thing now, Steve. We are both parents. You have son and daughter, is that right?
Yeah, daughter, she's the eldest, and my son, yeah.
Okay, I've got an older daughter, younger son as well. Mine are 10 and 8. I think yours are a little bit older than that. But I love talking to fellow dads to ask them
Mhm.
not only what you love about fatherhood, but also what the biggest challenges are for parents in 2025. So let's start backwards. What is the biggest challenge for parents in 2025?
I think screen time has got to be the biggest challenge. I think there's that pendulum swing of like you don't want your kid showing up at recess pulling out marbles saying this, my daddy says this is a video game, right? So you don't want them to be like playing in the woods, but you want them to be socially connected. You want them to be engaged. You want them to do what all the other kids are doing. But you also don't want that to be the excuse and enable them to be on the screen constantly because they're not just playing games on it. Like the social fabric has intertwined with the game, right? So these guys are playing games while talking at the same time instead of just playing a game and discussing it afterwards. So it's almost like they're kind of roped into it. You have no choice but to do that. So I think limiting that time and letting them know that this is not the real world, that the world is so much bigger than just a screen and your friends and the friendships and making, just trying to give them experiences. And that's the great thing about being a stand-up is that I travel so much and bringing them with me and telling them you're putting that down. You're coming out with me for 4 or 5 hours. We're going to go to Central Park. We're going to ride the subway. We're going to get a hot dog and, get a slice of pizza in New York City and enjoy your day and enjoy and just be as supportive as I can, and listen and still treat them like, an adult, but also treat them like a child. So it's just this always this gray area between of like how much is too much and how little is too little and just finding that balance of everything, right?
Yeah, moderation is the key. And yeah, it's important to teach them to be present little problem solvers that can look somebody else in the eyes and just have a face-to-face conversation. That seems to be a lost art these days.
A present little problem solver. That's great. That's a great way of putting it.
Thank you. And last question, what do you love about fatherhood? First of all, I love that you take your kids on the road with you from time to time. That's really cool. Hopefully not to Connecticut, but some of the cooler places on the tour schedule. But what do
Mhm.
you love about being a dad, Steve?
I think the greatest thing about being a dad, I mean, that's such a tough question, but I think one of the greatest moments in fatherhood I've had, or parenthood, I should say, is this memory. And look, there's so many things to be proud of, my kids, but I'll never forget my wife and I always drill in, the golden rule, treat others like you want to be treated. And there was a day my son was in I believe fifth grade, or not fifth grade. He was 5. He was in kindergarten. So it was either first grade or kindergarten. And there was a young man in line being made fun of by these two other kids. And my son approached them and he literally said, "Stop it. You got to treat people like you want to be treated." And it was one of those things, it was like, single tear. Oh my God, like it actually worked. But he knew when to enact it, he knew when to trigger it, and he went over and stuck up for somebody, and he relayed the information in a very impactful way. And it was one of those things where it's like, okay, I think this is going to be a good kid because I think ultimately you want to put somebody out there in the world that's not going to hold up the line, not be an asshole, and be cool. And I was like, all right, I think, because the boy, you're always a little more worried about the boy, right? The girls are a little more mature. So with Livy, I think she's got a good head on her shoulders, but I mean, this kid is, you know, he's as immature as they come. But I think when push comes to shove, he's cornered. He does the right thing. So I think that was one example of like the first time where I was like, okay, I think we're in a good space.
That is,
Because like on the same time, we were at a restaurant recently, and we were eating together, having a boys' day, and he leaned forward and he goes, "Boy, it smells like somebody farted." And I'm just eating my food, and then he turns around, he looks at the booth behind him, and he leans forward. He goes, "Dad, I think it was the people behind me. I think the guy at the booth farted." And again, I'm not saying anything. I'm just eating food. And then he just looks at me. He goes, "You got me. It was me." So I didn't accuse him. I didn't question it. I didn't ask him. But he said it. He said those things, and he basically cornered and boxed himself into a corner, and he just admitted it. So even in that moment, he was still truthful. But that's what I'm dealing with. That's what I love. Just like those little memories, right?
yeah, you just got to make sure to teach him that there's a really old person who is behind him. He can just stick with that story and probably get away with it in the end.
That's right. Yeah. 100%.
Well, for those of you listening right now, this is airing on the radio show on Monday. There are still some tickets left to the shows this weekend. That will not be the case by the time we get to Thursday or Friday. So I cannot recommend enough to go check Steve Byrne out at the Comedy Mothership. I've seen a lot of stand-up shows in my life. I don't know if I've ever laughed harder than when I watch Steve perform. It is a great
Oh,
blend of
thank you.
messing with the crowd, of material that he's probably been working on for a little while. There's a lot of relevancy too. He hits current events. It is the perfect storm, in my opinion. And by the end, he may burn that entire club to the ground with his incredible jokes. ComedyMothership.com. Also, check out more of his work and future tour dates through punchup.live. Has a presence there as well. Steve, it's always a pleasure, man. Thank you so much for the time. Best of luck with your Pittsburgh Steelers the rest of this offseason, and we'll be in touch again soon, hopefully.
Absolutely, Trey. Thank you, and looking forward to catching up with at the bar.